Thank you, Professor Zacharias, for this wonderful and edifying presentation. You mentioned the importance of truth as being so essential, and I fully agree. As a person who tries to follow Christ in my own life, one of the challenges for us in the world of academia, but it's not just in the world of academia, but it's also in the world of politics, in this late modern age, is that people understand the truth as being different. People have their own views of the truth. How would you respond to this relativization of truth? I believe that we as Christians need to come up with a genuine answer to this question rather than with a dogma, which often is what we respond to.
That's a great question. How does one really define truth? We always know how to define truth when we are the victim of a lie. There's no doubt about that. When you are victimized by a lie, you know exactly what the truth means. It's only when you're the instrument of untruth that you're not quite sure what truth really means. And this is, for example, when I was at the University of Iowa, they had asked me to speak on coherence and culture. So I spoke on the subject, and a student went up to the microphone and she cupped her hands around her mouth and she shouted at me and she said, "Who told you culture needs to be coherent?" She said, "Where did you get this definition from? Isn't it a Western idea that we are forcing upon the rest of the world that culture needs to be coherent?" Now, you know, I've learned through experience, if you allow anybody to talk long enough, they stumble into a pit. And so she was waxing eloquent and I just let her talk, and finally I said to her, "All right, ma'am, I'll be happy to answer your question if you will answer mine. And here's my question for you. When I answer you, do you want my answer to be coherent, or may I be incoherent in my answer to you?" I said, "That's all I want to know." And the audience burst out laughing. I said, No, please don't laugh. I want her to tell me, does she really expect my answer to be coherent, or may I be incoherent? You know, she just stood there and stared at me. What we expect from the other person is to play by the rules. But we don't expect that from ourselves. So let me give you the simplest definition of what I believe is the definition of truth. Truth is primarily a property of propositions, and it is a statement that is made in conformity with reality. It has to conform to reality as it really is. Let me position it, for example, this way. When this man came to Jesus and asked him a question, he was trying to pit politics against religion. And he said to Jesus, "Is it okay to pay taxes to Caesar?" I wish Jesus had answered that differently. It would have been wonderful if Jesus would have said, "Absolutely not." Then you can be religious and rebellious at the same time. You know what Jesus said? "Do you have a coin?" The man said, "Yes." He said, "Give it to me." He says, "Whose image do you see on this coin?" And the man said, "Caesar." Jesus said, "Give to Caesar that which belongs to Caesar, and give to God that which belongs to God." He should have had a follow-up question. The follow-up question should have been, "What belongs to God?" And Jesus would have said, "Whose image is on you?" That's the answer to truth. I am made in the image of God to reflect His splendor. Now I find it fascinating what Jesus claimed. He didn't say, "I am speaking the truth." He didn't just say, "I am presenting the truth." He said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." He conformed to the essential nature of reality as it was intended to be. Now, why is it that you get into a plane and they tell you there is a smoke detector here? Do not touch, tamper, disable, or destroy. The smoke detector. Why don't they just say, don't mess with it? Why do they say touch, tamper, disable, or destroy? Because with the conniving minds that you and I have, every word can die the death of 1,000 qualifications. I didn't touch it, I just destroyed it, you know. Oh yeah, I destroyed it, but I didn't tamper with it. One lawyer told me that when you go into a court of law, never ask a person if you were ever alone with this person. Because in his mind he can say, if I'm with that person, I'm not alone. The courts of law have made the culprit of language which doesn't mean anything except in its own way. Let me give you one more illustration and I'll close on that. In the 1980s, after the 1990s, as time had come and gone and all kinds of things were happening, when Bill Clinton was the president, there were questions that were being raised about his use of language. You know the story. The press reporters took the microphone, CNN took a microphone on the streets. America lives with a salvation by survey. You survey people and find your salvation. So they went to people and asked them this question: do you believe words have any meaning at all, or only the meaning the speaker chooses to give to it? And you know what the average person said? I reserve the right to give my words my own meaning. Second question, do you believe morality has absolutes, or everybody has a choice to use their own morality? You know what they said? We have the choice to use our own morality. And that was the survey result. Third item on the news. I'm not making this up because I was speaking at the North Carolina Bar Association, and they were all sitting there like this, the lawyers and judges, waiting to see what I had to say. So I quoted this. Words don't have meaning for Americans. You can make your own meaning. Morality doesn't have meaning for Americans. You can make your own morality. I said, do you know what the third item on the news was? And they were listening. I said, we have just sent a warning to Saddam Hussein that if he doesn't stop playing his word games, we're going to start bombing him. All of a sudden, words had meaning. All of a sudden, morality had meaning. Truth is that which conforms to reality as it is. And what my brother has said there so clearly, we must have a propositional definition of what it means to be human. If we do not even have that definition, truth has gone by the wayside, because it'll die the death of 1,000 qualifications. As I said, you have your humanity, I have my humanity, and then the two humanities collide. What happens to humanism if we don't know the human of the ism? What does humanity mean? We have to define. When I spoke at Johns Hopkins, all speakers were invited to give their definition of what it means to be human. Francis Collins, the scientist, and I were the only ones from the Judeo-Christian perspective. It was fascinating to hear the definitions of what it meant to be human. But if their definitions were taken literally, they would not give me the privilege of living by my own prerogatives. I would have to live by their definition of their prerogatives. Life has a sharp edge. So truth is that which conforms to reality, and Jesus said he embodied that reality.
Thank you so much. There is a quote from an author you started with, Aldous Huxley,
yes,
who recreates the trial of Jesus before Pilate, and the words are, "What is the truth?" said jesting Pilate, and he would not wait for an answer.
Right.
Oftentimes, indeed, as Huxley
Yeah.
observed, the modern man wouldn't wait for
The
an
answer.
answer to that
Very true.
crucial question, what
Yeah.
is indeed the truth?
Yeah. And that's why Huxley went on in a dangerous statement to say, I want this world not to have meaning, because it gives me the prerogative of my own political and moral definitions. A world with meaning has objective weight over me. A world without meaning gives me the privilege of my own definitions. It's very fascinating. He didn't want the truth either. Yep.
Thank you. Who wants the floor?
Yes. That's it.
Please.
Nice to see you, Ravi Zacharias. My name is Daniel Montano. I'm an architect and an artist. I have to tell you first that you are responsible of a lot of my nights without sleep because I'm staying on the internet and staying and listening to you. I have to tell you that you are much more sympathetic in flesh and bones, but you seem to be much taller on internet.
Thank you.
Here in Europe, a lot of pain, suffering, and wars were due not because of the fight between religions, but because of the fight between Christian denomination. My first question is how you see that, fighting between Christian denomination, because it is somehow understandable fight between Christian and Muslims, but Christians killing other Christians for Christian reason, that's a problem. And the second one is that you are staying in a building that was built at least 25 years before by a man who wanted to left something after him. This is the biggest desire, to leave something after myself, after I'm dying. When Israelites built a temple, it was a strange situation. Never God asked them, build a temple for me. But David wanted to build a temple for God. So his son was the one that built the temple. But what's interesting is the builder and the architect of the temple was not a Jewish, but was a man named Hiram that came from Syria, I guess. I want a comment on this too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if you will just restate for me the first question, so I'll go in order. The first question was
how you think about
legacy,
violence and wars and fighting between Christians, not Christians and other religions?
It's a very sobering question, and it's a question that a lot of people ask, a lot of young people ask me. So let me move from the forgotten to the reality. The truth of the matter is sometimes religious people are blamed for most of the violence in the world. Richard Dawkins and all talk about this. It's totally untrue. I mean, when you think of the slaughter that has taken place under the regimes in Mao's day, in Stalin's day, in Cambodia, and all that went on, tens of millions, atheism has ended up destroying tens of millions more lives than religion ever has. And the problem is, in atheism, it can be the logical outworking of a philosophy, and in the sacred belief, it's an illogical outworking. So on that platform, I moved to the next answer. Yes, I see this happening. In fact, one of the most painful realities is in Jerusalem, in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Some of you may have been there. They've got these 5 groups from the Ethiopian, the Orthodox, the Catholic, and all of that, who occupy a certain area of the church there. Do you know, some of you may not know, that those 5 groups don't talk to each other. And the key is held by a Muslim who lives upstairs and comes and unlocks the door in the morning. I'm not making up a story. I personally talked to the Greek patriarch out there and asked him, is this true? He said, I'm sorry to say it is. We are going to try and work this out, but too many years have gone by. Here's the danger, sir, the way I see it. When religion becomes politicized, it destroys both the political system and the religious system. And the political power of one group over another is what is vying for the most sacred spot. These people almost never open the Bible and read it. They are never on their knees before God, living with the single greatest truth of the Christian faith, which is grace. Grace is conspicuous by its absence amongst these power brokers in the world. And when two denominations, somebody has said, when Jesus was in this world, he healed the blind with two ways. With one he used mud, with another he didn't use mud. He said if he did it in our day, we'll have two denominations, the Muddites and the anti-Muddites. We want to start something new. And so sometimes they are not denominations, they're abominations. They become structures of power. And I just say, that's what actually ultimately took the life of Jesus. It was religious authorities, political authorities. They crucified him. But when you think about it, what your tremendous sculptor Livio has done. I was in his home this week in Cluj. He has a long nail, very long nail, and the top of that nail is highly polished. And this brilliant sculptor designed it in such a way so that when you're holding that nail, you see a reflection of yourself. I'm the one that crucified him. Took an artist to state the painful and the most obvious. Religious demagoguery is the worst kind of demagoguery, but it's also in Islam, the Shias, the Sunnis, the Ahmadiyyas, the Seveners, the Twelvers, the Sufis. My colleague at work, Nabil Qureshi, his father is a devout Muslim. Nabil began to follow Jesus Christ, a powerful speaker. I spoke to his father. I said, what brought you to America? He said, I'm an Ahmadiyya from Pakistan, and I was being persecuted by the Muslim majority out there. So he was persecuted by the Muslims, comes to America, and works at the Pentagon. He's in the Navy, given a chance. So I would say this tragedy is you never judge a philosophy by its abuse. You never judge a philosophy by its abuse. And these religious personalities abuse their faith and give the faith a name that is really a wrong name. We have to be followers of Jesus Christ. When Jesus was attacked and Peter took his sword, he said, put it down. If you live by the sword, you're going to die by the sword. And he told them to go and preach the gospel and change the hearts of men and women. And so, sir, first of all, I want to thank you for the artistry in which you're involved. Your discipline can speak volumes much more than philosophers can do sometimes. Art angles into the truth. Philosophy is sometimes in your face. I believe one of the things I do in talking to religious leaders is raise this very question. What would Jesus think of your behavior and what you are doing? And I said that to the patriarch. I said, what would Jesus Christ think of this place called the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, when you men are not even talking to each other? The Prince of Peace has been violated in the very leadership here. I think it's going to take a whole generation of young people to come up on the scene and show the example of how to live the truth and not just to talk about it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have something for you as a present.
Let's keep this for the end. Sorry, let's keep this for the end. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Please.
I'm very concerned about the choices that governments and nations are making nowadays, and especially those where the majority of population is Christian. And I'm concerned as being a mother and grandmother for the families, because I see that in the human history, when the family was strong, the society was strong and sustainable. And you travel a lot and you see what happens and you hear about what happens in the world. Do you have an explanation for what happens? For instance, 3 days ago, Ireland had voted in the referendum for the same-sex marriages. And this is a very Catholic country. And little by little it is coming on us too. So these are the problems that we have to talk and debate on in our parliament nowadays. I want to know if you have an explanation for this, and how could we, as people with morality and integrity and faith, protect our Christian values and protect the future of our children?
This is a very painful question, and I think, I'll tell you what, I have been on the university circuit now for 30 years. This one question, when it comes from the floor, could destroy everything I've tried to say for the previous hour on any other subject. I could be talking on the age of the earth, and somebody will put his hand up and raise the question about his right to sexuality and so on. I have three approaches to it. I'm sorry that I have to make it brief, but this is what it is. I say, let's start off with what it is that the community that wants favorably disposed minds towards, say, gay marriage or whatever. What is it, the word they use? Tolerance. Tolerance. They want us to be tolerant. But I say the way they have behaved has made this the most publicly unanswerable question. Most publicly unanswerable question. I'll tell you why. There are three types of cultures with morality. The first is what you call a theonomous culture. Theos, God, nomos, law. God's law is put into our hearts, where we have the imperatives within us to think his thoughts after him. Once upon a time, America believed that. They called about truths that were self-evident. They talked about self-evident truths. They don't talk about it anymore because they don't believe the theos and the nomos, natural law, works. India sometimes comes close to it, that in our consciences we have what is true about the family and parents and grandparents and so on. But nobody really lives with a theonomous culture. Then you have a heteronymous culture. Heteronymous is heteros meaning another, nomos meaning a law, where the few at the top control it for the masses below. In religion, Islam is a heteronymous culture. The mullahs, the sheikhs, the ulama, they all control it for the masses. In secularism, Marxism is a heteronymous culture, where a few at the top control the behavior of the masses below. But we don't want a heteronymous culture. The young people in America say that. So when a student at UCLA asked me, I said, all right, so you're not theonomous. When I described it, he said, that's right. I said, you're not heteronymous. You don't want a few at the top dictating for you. He said, that's right. I said, what's left? Autonomous. Autos meaning self, nomos meaning law. Each person has a right to dictate his morality and march by those boundaries. I said, now, if you believe that, are we an autonomous culture? He said, yes. I said, now I want to ask you this question. If I give myself autonomy and answer your question about the way I prefer things to be, are you suddenly going to switch and make it a heteronymous or a theonomous judgment upon my autonomy? Is this a bait and switch question? He just stared at me. I said, do you see what you're doing? You're talking about tolerance, but you are redefining the whole word. You made it publicly unanswerable. I said, I want to talk to you about it, but if I publicly answer this, you will want to destroy me. You will want to destroy anybody who has the same belief. I said, let's meet in private, sit around a table, and we will interact. Why? Because I want to convey two things to you, I said. Number two, a press reporter from ABC stopped me at the University of Indiana. Indiana University, where I'd done an open forum on atheism. And she was only going to stay 5 minutes, but she stayed the 3 hours. And then she said, I want to talk to you. And she was walking with me at about 9 or 9:30 at night. It was late. And she said, Mr. Zacharias, I'll tell you what my problem is with Christianity. I said, you all are against racism. You're against racism, and that's a good thing. But then you discriminate against the homosexual, and that's a bad thing. So I said, ma'am, it's interesting to me how you have phrased the question. On race, it's an ism. On behavior, it's a person. I said, but I'll leave it at that. I just want to respond to you. I said, I'll tell you why. Race is sacred. You do not violate a person's race. My ethnicity is sacred. You do not violate my ethnicity. I said, because ethnicity is sacred, we do not violate it. I said, so is sexuality sacred, and we do not violate it. You have to tell me how you treat race as sacred and desacralize sexuality. She stopped and looked at me and said, I have never thought of it in those terms. I said, please understand how the Christian sees marriage. The Christian sees marriage as a sacred expression. We have the sacred commitment before our spouses. We have the sacredness of sexuality. I said, even now in America, a large percentage is against marital infidelity. They also see it as sacred, but they don't want to admit it. There is a sacredness to sexuality. Marriage is the most beautiful thing that has to be carried out by God's design, and so we see sexuality as sacred and having to be guarded. Why do you want to take away the sacredness of that? You step onto a slippery slope and everything will become desacralized. She shook my hand and she said, you know what? I have to think about this. I understand where you're coming from and why you say it. I said, but one more thing I want to say to you. So 3 kinds of cultures, sacredness of sexuality. I said, I have no right not to love the person who disagrees with me on this. I still am called upon by God to love the individual who disagrees with me. If the individual says, don't violate my inclination, then I say to them, does my wife have the right to tell me that too? That she should not violate her inclination, or I must not violate my inclination. When I'm tempted, do I give in to my inclination, or do I bring a higher moral law to address my inclination, and that I do what God has ordered my life? That is not proclivity that justifies behavior. It is the sacredness of my inclinations that have to be harnessed and brought together. So I love those who have a different worldview. I got another doctorate from a university 2 years ago. I won't name the university, prestigious university. And the chancellor didn't want me to get the doctorate because of my views on gay marriage, he said. Imagine that. And the faculty said, give us one statement that offended you in his writings or in his speech, and he couldn't find it. So they gave me the doctorate. And while I was walking away after my talk, the chancellor in his robes came to me and said, Ravi, I just want to thank you. He said, there's a long story behind you coming here. Thank you for coming and inspiring us and touching my life this morning. I spoke on a completely different subject. And so I say to you this, between the heteronymous struggle, between and publicly unanswerable, between the reality of the sacredness of how we address this and loving our fellow human being, these 3 threads have to come together, and we should be given the privilege of why we speak against legitimizing a certain behavior. And take a step back. 5,000 years of civilized history has never ever made what is now being called marriage as legitimate and legal. 5 millennia of history never called it this. Behavior, yes, it has been there. Calling it the sacredness of marriage, never been there in 5,000 years. And if we are removing the fence, we better find out why it was put there in the first place before the whole thing collapses. So we pray for you with love and affection, and if the fence falls, we will pay the price. But we cannot say nothing. We have to speak in gentleness but clarity. And with that, I will close. The time may be running out for us.